Welcome down, everybody, to Talk to Me. And, we've got two people here with me, right? I know this is our first episode and everything, so those of y'all who are seeing us on YouTube via the cameras, so just to set the stage of what's going on here in the studio. You see, I don't know if that camera is picking it up, but Sashe's over here. That's going to be a bit of an Inception situation right now because there's two Sashis in the room. That's Sashe, the producer guy, and there's Sashe here, who is the guy who's one of the guests with us today. You will see him again, but Sashe, maybe you want to introduce yourself because this is the first episode and everything.
Sure. I'm Sashe. I'm from Leaderonomics. I head up the digital team, and I'm very pleased to be here as your first guest. In
this is supposed to be
inaugural episode.
He's so proper. Everybody. So anybody who wants someone proper. Just kidding. But yes, Sashe is here, but we also have another person here with us, Andrea. Maybe you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yes. Should I go in proper?
If you want to.
Okay, so I'm Andrea Chew. What shall I say? Shall I say that I'm from Leaderonomics too?
If you
You
want
just
to.
did.
You just did.
Yes, smart. So I'm from Leaderonomics. I'm doing marketing, but I think on more of a personal side, you can check me out on Here Andrea Out, and that's where my content is as well. Yeah.
So what's that? Here, Andrea.
Here Andrea Out is basically my sort of platform for me to express myself in whether song, music, creative stuff, anything. And I call myself a creative expressionist. So anything that I express myself in creativity, all that content goes.
Is that a website? A blog
It's actually
site?
on Instagram.
It's on Instagram.
Yes.
I'm sorry, it registered in my head as you express yourself creatively instead of you express yourself with creativity. I'm sorry. It's just a random thought that goes through my head whenever someone says something. But thanks, Andrea. But the format that we have here with this particular podcast, it's conversation. So everyone's going to hear our point of view. Doesn't mean it's wrong or right. It's just a point of view on something. But maybe before we get into the conversation topic of today, it's the first time having you both here. We're probably going to see you guys here again. But this year, 2020, it is coming to an end. But I've got to ask, really, how's it been for both of y'all? Like, I know I have conversations with y'all otherwise, but yeah.
I'd like to hear Andrea out.
Okay. Why don't you express yourself creatively?
Oh my god, this year! No, I'm just not going to go into a drama expression, but I think there's good and bad.
Okay.
Of course, as much as I say, oh my god, it sucks so bad, at the same time, there's so many things and opportunities to learn.
Right.
And also a lot of realizations. I think that's one thing I realized is
Okay.
that there is so many things that you can realize during a pandemic that you don't usually realize on the normal non-pandemic world.
Like what? Like what did you realize?
Things like you appreciate a lot more, especially family. The fact that I can't go home and see my parents, I appreciate them more. Like I used to go back, I'm from Taiping.
Okay.
So when I go back, I'll be like, oh, I'm going back because I want to see my cat, I want to have wonton mee,
Right.
I want to do this, I want to do that. I never
love
go
this.
like,
I love
want
that
to
city,
see.
though.
Yeah.
I love that city. I've been there a few times, and every time I go back there, it's calm.
Is it though?
I mean,
To you.
Depends. It's always different when people visit and people
so.
stay there. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
but to me it is, especially, I know people oversell it, but that is this little beauty about the whole Lake Garden thing and how big that whole place is. Like
Yes.
that entire Lake Garden piece.
Yeah.
I know recently they've been like eating into the forest area with like a lot of development.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So they are developing like a lot of like apartments and stuff as well.
Okay.
But even on the lake gardens, they are trying to make certain pieces to be commercial, but because of the people have been rejecting it, they've
Right.
been fighting with the council and all
Right.
that. So that's on pause and
Okay.
on minimal level. So like certain food shops and all that, they still have it,
Okay.
but it's very tightly controlled.
Right.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, because people don't like that,
Okay.
they boycott the business and it's dead.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so downsides to some things. Yeah.
Okay. So when was the last you went back?
Wow. When was the last that I went? Before MCO hit, I guess. Before the pandemic.
Like the first MCO that we had in March, or like?
Yes, the very first one in March.
Oh, so you've not been back since March?
No.
Wow.
So I think the
Okay.
last time I was there was in February.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you haven't seen your parents since then?
Oh no. So my
They
dad came down with my
Okay,
mom.
right.
So that's okay.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
that's good.
But in recent times, you have not.
Nope.
Okay. So I guess in your view, it's that whole appreciation of things that you can't do as usually anymore.
Yeah.
What about you?
Crazy year. But so I think we gotta maybe differentiate two categories of people as well, right? And
Just in case everyone wants to know, like Sashe is a very like process driven frameworks.
I'm
He's already starting with this
Yeah.
categories, but go ahead.
Yeah,
Two categories.
I'm very logical, right? So as I break things down.
That's the one thing I'm worried about because Andrea, I'm warning you. As we get into the conversation, he's going to out-logic us. Or going to try to out-logic
us.
Going to try to out-logic us.
No. So I think there are a certain group of people who have been affected devastatingly by the pandemic, right?
Right.
I'm talking about people who have lost their jobs and have no income.
Right.
People who have lost loved ones. So if you consider them, right? I mean, this is just the most awful year, right? And you really can't come back from this year.
Right.
Because it's losses that you just can't come back from.
Right.
Then there's another group of people who I think are affected.
Okay.
Can't visit family, pay cuts, business challenges, mobility issues, especially if you're a very social person, you can't go out and appreciate things. I think for all those people, it's not adversely affected to the point that you can't recover, but I think if you really change your mindset, there are opportunities.
Right.
There are things that we had an opportunity to do and learn this year that we wouldn't have done it without the impetus.
Right.
So there are opportunities as well, which I agree with Andrea. So.
Right.
But I want to caveat that for some people, this year just you can't come back from it.
Okay. Do I get a state to not
Of
say
course.
it and all that? Oh, okay. So I have to say it as well. I asked the question. I've got to answer my own questions. What's going on? No, but I guess for me, it's I agree with both of y'all in some sense. Like with Sashe of that whole categorization thing of how different people sort of have a different experience of how this whole thing is. And I think like for myself especially, it's been very odd. If that's the word I can use, very odd. I can't even say it's been a horrible year. I can't say it's been a good year either. Because there's a mix of both of it. But for some odd reason, I can't reconcile that with myself.
Yeah.
I can't. It really feels odd. Like there's an empty space called 2020. And things happen in 2020. There's a lot of things that happen. If I take moments to sit back and just look at it, yes, it's amazing. Exactly like some things that Sashe said, being at the heart of things that changed. Like it had to change. If it didn't change, we wouldn't survive. Or what we're doing right now, and by the way, for everyone listening, we're sitting inside the Leaderonomics studio, and we all are part of Leaderonomics. So if we didn't do what we did, we wouldn't be here right now. But then there's the whole part where I'm stuck at home, working from home. I prefer not to do that. I actually prefer coming into spaces. And then that whole discovery towards myself of, I know I'm an introvert, which I need my own space, but at the same time, I can't be alone.
Yeah.
So this year has just been a blank, odd year for me. And that's a way to put it. But I'm going to come back to this a little while because I asked this question because I just wanted to test you both actually.
Oh wow! Okay, did we pass?
I tested you both because I just wanted to see how each one of y'all answered this question.
Okay.
And that kind of proved a little point for the topic that we have today.
Sashe, are you in trouble?
I'm too logical apparently.
Okay.
No, it's not a logical thing, but it's just a very different way on how both
we
of
look
y'all
at
answer
things,
this question, right? It's the same question. It is the same question, but both answered very differently. And so that brings us to the topic for this particular Talk to Me, episode 1, right? But before I lead into the topic, I gotta get the elephant out of the room, but address the elephant in the room. And I don't mean this the wrong way, Andrea. I'm sorry. I'm going to ask you the question. I didn't mean to. Don't take it as a pun or a pun intended, nothing like that.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you this question. Right?
Okay.
You've got 2 men sitting in the room with you right now. Sorry, 3.
Three.
Not forgetting Sashe, producer Sashe here, who is right now trying to put a device contraption to record us with, I don't know, something. But you got 3 men in the room. And I'm sorry to say it's 3 Indian men as well.
Oh wow! Yeah. See, I didn't even pick that up.
It's 3 Indian men in the room. One is bald.
Yeah.
And it cannot get any more stereotypical for this particular topic. It cannot. You couldn't write a script for this. And the topic is actually a question. I want to ask you this first question, right? In your view, why do you think men struggle to talk about problems, or really struggle to talk about things that they have a hard time with?
I think the biggest thing that I can remember, or rather I have an opinion about very strongly, is basically how society has shaped them.
Okay.
And I'm not going to say upbringing alone, because
Right.
I don't believe that just being brought up in a certain way, you can live that way all your life.
Okay.
But it's the fact that there is constant reinforcements in society
Okay.
to sort of put men in a box.
Right.
To say that, okay, if you're going to talk about real struggles and all that, you're going to be defined as non-masculine. That's one.
Okay.
Or that your credibility sort of diminishes because you share about things that you're facing problems
Okay.
with.
Right.
Like, let me give you an example, right?
Sure.
So my dad and all that, he don't talk about his real struggles, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if he's going to tell us children about, oh, it's very hard for me to provide for you. It's very hard for me to give you some financial aid, He will never say that. He'll say, I will find the way. I will find the way. He will always say that. And when I ask him, why can't you just be honest with us and say this is the situation? Then he say, then how am I going to call myself father? Instantly, that just becomes his answer. So yeah, let that sink in for a bit, because I think that's the biggest realization I had when I was thinking about this.
Sinking.
Don't sink all the way to the bottom
Okay.
yet.
But where did it come from though? Like you mentioned a few things over there, right? That society shaped it,
Yeah.
right? It is this whole nature of being macho, if anything. Like a man has got to be this. Like, how am I going to be a father if I talk about my problems? Where did that expression come from? Where did that thought come from? Like, why do people have to view men as being macho?
I think there's two.
Right.
One is, of course, media. We always blame the media for everything.
Okay.
Media does this, media shows this, you
Right.
consume that, then you have social learning and you learn certain things.
Okay.
That's it.
Right.
But I think another underlying thing that we don't usually talk about, especially in Asian culture, is tradition.
Okay.
So things that are taught from your grandfather to your father to you and to your son and all of that, it's a cycle that continues simply because men did that a long time ago.
Right.
Which is, of course, be a breadwinner, provide. Don't talk about anything that is emotional. Just go and provide and find money for your family. Make sure there's food on the table. There's so much pressure and expectations on the men that's been set because of how society was structured that way long time ago.
Okay.
So these are two things,
Right.
and it just conveys down, and people who do not realize it and break that cycle
Right.
continues teaching that. And I see this a lot on a daily basis, right?
Okay.
I like to, so this is a weird thing about me. I like to observe people a lot. I have to go in public spaces.
So you're like one of those grassy knolls sitting down,
Oh, no.
just watching
No lah,
people.
I'm with you here. Like, one of my favorite things is like airport before a flight.
Yeah.
Ladies and
Like
gentlemen,
in the
we've got
cafe,
two stalkers in the studio. You see in the corner of a cafe,
Self-proclaimed.
Sashi and Andrea sitting down just watching.
And then we'll
Like
come down and
owls.
write notes.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
My wife will hit me and say, "Stop staring! Stop staring!"
I will keep myself
Good on
from staring. Yeah, and it's true. I like to observe like human behavior and how things just form when people are not realizing people are watching them.
Okay.
It's a very interesting phenomena for me.
Right.
And so I see this a lot with people with kids, especially. I love seeing how people deal with children.
Okay.
And unfortunately, even not just men teaching them, like I say, grandfathers to fathers to sons and downward forth, it's
Mother.
everybody else. It's the mother, it's the sister, it's anybody. I'm not saying that everybody's like that, but I'm saying that it's not limited to that gender,
Right.
right? It's not limited to that specific sex. Anybody in that society that has been brought up that way and they
Right.
see somebody else being taught that way continues that cycle, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah.
It's really interesting you're saying that, and you just. I'm sorry, you just opened a can of worms because there's like a few things like floating in my head at the moment. Like when you said about that whole watching, parents with kids. Like I've got a 2-year-old, so you just made me think about how I am handling my 2-year-old, and I'm remembering back what I went through. Like my 2-year-old cries. He cries. He definitely cries. But me and my wife are trying to stop him from simply crying, not because he's a boy, but more of we keep on telling him, if you cry, you're going to spoil your own day. because if you cry, you're gonna make somebody else upset. People will just want to move away from you or leave you in the corner and let you just not cool down. Just cool down before you even react to anybody else. So we tell him don't cry because of that. But then I vaguely remember this, like when I'm growing up, my mother and my father are telling me like, why are you crying? You're a boy. You shouldn't be crying.
Yeah, exactly.
I vaguely remember that happening. So
Yep.
I think to kind of take off on that, right? It's not just crying. I think crying is the most common emotion we associate, right? With why men don't cry, maybe, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's every other emotion. It's every other strong emotion, right?
Yep.
And so back to crying, like for example, what we should say to kids is not don't cry, not don't emote, but help them handle the emotion.
Yeah.
Because what we often wind up telling people is don't have the emotion.
Right.
Correct.
Which is
You're right,
completely
you're right.
unnatural.
You're right, you're right,
You
you're
can
right.
tell people not to have the
Right.
emotion all you want, but all you're
Yeah.
doing is suppressing it because
Yeah.
the human brain is still going to have the emotion.
Yeah.
Right? And the biochemistry is still going to kick in.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're still going to have the emotion, but now I'm like, I can't express it. I'm going to hold it in. But actually, what you should be teaching people is how to healthily deal with that emotion.
Right.
Yeah.
So that it doesn't hurt yourself
Right.
or others.
Right.
Like, for example, so it doesn't ruin your day.
Yeah.
So how do you healthily handle the emotion?
Yeah.
But we don't do that as a society, as you're right, and it's passed down, right?
Yeah.
We just say, don't have the emotion. Whatever the emotion is, don't have it.
It's true, and I can share with you an example that just happened like less than 3 weeks ago. So I was with somebody's nephew, and we were in this house, and there's this dog that is quite intimidating, but the dog is very manipulative. It only haunts on people who are scared of him.
Right.
So this boy is of course scared. He's young.
Yeah.
He's like less than 5 years old.
Right.
And he's just like, he's screaming because he's like, oh my god, the dog is coming after me. And it's fear, right? We're talking about the emotion of fear.
Correct.
And everybody is telling him, don't be afraid, stand up to the dog, don't cry, stand there. And I'm just like, how can you say someone who's afraid, don't be afraid, stand there and fight your fears? Like, he's 5 years old, even us, like, above 20s,
Yeah.
we struggle with that, right? And eventually, I watched it go as long as the day
Right.
went. And eventually I sat down with the child and said that it's okay to be afraid. There are certain ways that we can learn to overcome the fear. And I just hugged him because I felt like he was so afraid and nobody even held his hand, hugged him, protected him, nothing of that, simply
Right.
because he was a boy.
Right.
When the other girl, who was about 7, did the same thing, everybody was just,
Protecting her.
protecting her, come here, don't be afraid, come here, It's the same connotation of don't be afraid, but the action is different.
Yeah.
And for me, that is very unfair. And that's how things start. It's just a seed
Gender
that's planted.
stereotypes, right? It
Yeah.
starts there.
Correct.
And interesting that you said that because I was doing some I did some research before I came to this.
Okay.
I know it's supposed to be a conversation, but a little bit of research there which sort of points to two things that you guys brought up, like the biochemistry component and also the societal component thing. And very interesting you said that. I was about to ask you, how would you have reacted instead? Because honestly, it never crossed my mind. Like, if a dog's running towards a kid, I wouldn't tell the kid, don't be afraid. I'd probably stand in front of the kid.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't hug the kid and tell him it's okay to be afraid. Just give him a hug, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know, Sashe, if you would naturally emote in that manner as well.
No, I would. So I think you got to deal with kids differently than
Yeah.
adults, right? So I'm a lot more comfortable dealing with adults. I'll be very honest, right? With kids, I'm more like fun play, but.
But okay, sure.
Yeah,
Let's take it from
but
that
let me.
now.
I take it
Yeah.
from that point. But actually, the psychology is the same. The psychology is remove the immediate threat so that the person has time to process. Because if the threat's in front of you, if you're afraid of something, right? If you have a phobia and that threat's in front of you, forget it. There's nothing else that's
Yeah.
going to work, right? The biochemistry kicks in. That's nothing going to
That's
work.
100%.
Yeah. So remove that threat first, and then let that person process, and
Right.
then give them a secure base to then approach that threat in a safe way.
Right.
Right. And the word is secure base. I'm borrowing that from George Colerizer's adult psychology. But secure base, it means that the person must be comfortable enough to then re-engage with that threat.
Right.
Right. And that's the safe way to handle fear.
Right.
And that's true whether you're a kid or you're an adult. But to tell the person don't be afraid, like Andrea said, it makes no sense.
Right.
Yeah, and so how do we do that as adults better so that that person then can grow up having healthy relationship with their emotions? Because I think maybe I want to call out that phrase, right? Is I don't know that men don't emote,
Right.
because it kind of implies that by the question, right? Again, I'm going to logic the crap out of this. Am I allowed to say
Let's
crap?
go.
Am I allowed to say crap? Okay.
You're allowed to.
Okay. So I think the steps I would say is that Number one, do they have emotions?
Okay.
Number two, do they know they have emotions?
Right.
Number three, do they want to show the emotion?
Right.
Number four, do they know how to show the emotion?
Okay.
So if I break it down into men and
See,
emotions,
he's breaking it down again.
I will break it down into those four, right?
Yeah.
So number one, first question to answer is, do men have emotions?
Definitely.
Exactly. Right?
Definitely.
So then the problem is elsewhere, right?
Right.
Because I think, I mean, there could be some biological things that you want to talk about,
Yeah.
but you can't argue the fact that we all have emotions.
Yeah.
So number two is, do they know they have emotions?
Okay.
Now,
I think it's a yes and a no kind of thing. Like, they know that they've got emotions, but maybe they don't know what emotions. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the situation.
yeah. What do you think, Andrea?
I think it depends.
Okay.
So, some men that I know, they know their emotions, but they choose not to. Hello, I do not have emotions. Like goodbye.
Yeah.
Wait a
So
minute,
that's
I mean-
moving up, right? So the 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So
Yes.
they're stuck at 3,
Yes.
right?
But let me ask this question, like, before you go on, Andrea. Like, even for any of us, right? Do we actually know, like, in a situation, do we actually know and pinpoint and say that I am happy?
No, I
You-
think
you just
emotions
feel, right?
are emotions are really complex.
Yeah.
As much as we say there's basic emotions
Yeah.
and all that, most of the time emotions are a mixture,
Okay.
and sometimes it's very hard for us to sit down and break down those mixtures and say that okay, in these 3-in-1 Nescafe, there's sugar, there's this and that, right? It's the same with emotions, and people who are I wouldn't say lacking, but have not practiced self-awareness enough,
Right.
will not be able to break it down.
Okay.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, and it's a practice. It's like a muscle. You have
So
to
something
you have to
intentional
practice.
you got to
Yes,
do.
yes.
Right.
And that's the part where, like she said, practice is a muscle, right? And if you haven't done that all through your childhood, and suddenly as an adult, right, you have this strong emotion sometime,
Yeah.
right? I don't even know it's an emotion.
Right.
I'm just acting out of instinct and things.
Right.
I don't even know it's caused by that emotion.
Right. Right.
And so that's why from beginning, I think we should help people identify an emotion.
Yeah.
That's really important. And then, and again, this is going back to psychology, it's not just identify the broad emotion, but the smaller emotion. Like if I'm angry, that's too broad.
Yeah.
Actually, it's because I'm hungry. Or actually, it's because
He's
I'm
hangry.
Yeah, or maybe I'm angry because I am hurt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Somebody insulted me.
Right.
So to being able to identify it is a big, big step already,
Yes.
Right.
which I think is a gap.
But on that note, when we're talking about emotions are, and I'm a firm believer of this. I don't know about you two, and do disagree if you feel so. I'm a firm.
I disagree. Oh, sorry. You haven't done it. Okay, sorry. Too
Okay,
early.
guys, podcast is over. I'm out. Sorry. I get it. But I'm a firm believer that emotions are more chemical than mental. I'm a firm believer of that. It's more chemical than mental. Because, all right, I agree with what you both said just now, where it's not that men don't emote. Right? Actually, research has been done and shows that both men and women feel emotions the same way. They do. Sometimes men even more than women, apparently. But apparently it's the way that it's expressed is very different. And the reason for that is because of the different chemical makeups in our body. Like those hormones that are in us, those are actually sort of that reagent that gives the brain the signal that this is how you're supposed to act. This is what you're supposed to do. And we know that our biology is different. So for women, when they react, they tend to react more, I wouldn't say more through to the emotion, but they are able to express it. They are able to express it more. And because their hormones are made for nurturing. Oh my God, did I just go on a stereotype there?
Yeah, you did.
Oh, shit. Don't kill me.
Yeah.
But for men, the hormones are made more for physical use. And physical use, maybe from our animalistic nature, is whether it's hunting, protecting, those kind of things.
Yeah.
So maybe nurturing kind of expressions are not really very important. Instead, anger, aggression, those kind of things. And that then forms this problem where how do you express those nurturing emotions for men? They kind of don't get it because the chemical triggers are not there.
I'm going to disagree.
I'm going to disagree too.
Okay.
So-
I want to hear this.
Okay. So I think, so there are different differences in biology and chemistry and hormones, right? But I think you are talking about nurturing.
Okay.
And I think that's a different topic.
Right.
Because I think expressing emotions doesn't have to be just the emotion of nurture.
Right.
Right? You can even just make it very simple. Anger. Or anything, right? Sadness. Right? So which is very far from nurture, right? So I think it applies to even those emotions. So that's why I don't want to go down that road of hormones and nurture and nature. And I think a lot of it, right? If we go down this path, a lot of it is about gender identity, right? And which I think in today's day and age, I think, of course, the human body is going to evolve. People's identities are evolving, and so gender identities are evolving. And I think that's actually going to help break down a lot of the stereotypes. Because previously, my father, my grandfather, male had a certain type of role. It's a role.
Yep.
It's a societal role that they had to play.
It's like a job.
And so everything else supports that role, right? A male had to fight or flight, right? They didn't have an option of don't act and just
Freeze.
feel, right? Just historically down the road, that's what's been passed down. So when you break these societal roles for men and women, I think the hormone question then becomes mute because I think it's not just nurture in nature, that kind of thing. Can we just be free to express ourselves without feeling weak in our intended role?
Right.
For example, right? Like a lot of men, if they earn less than their wives, right, would feel something.
Definitely. Yeah.
Right? And that's just archaic societal roles, right? Which is today, I think, more and more broken down. And I think then it just changes how we
but
feel.
It's interesting. Think about that. Like I'd say I've asked myself that question before. Like, what if my wife earned more than me?
Yeah.
Logically, I've got no issues.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have a problem. But something did suddenly just trigger in me that I felt uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I have no idea why. Because logically, it makes sense. If she's doing well, she should be earning more. But why do I feel the way I feel?
Deep cultural programming.
Yep.
Maybe.
Deep.
Maybe.
I think there's also this understanding. So I'm a firm believer of how humans can evolve, right? And I do agree that at a certain extent that chemicals play a huge part.
Yeah.
But we know about like brain rewiring. We learn about neural pathways being formed again because of how the society is shaping them or intense kind of variables playing a part. And it's the same, right? So if let's say, like for example, because of gender fluidity, we see this a lot.
Right.
Like I have friends who are from the LGBTQ society,
Right.
and they were straight, homosexual, very strong, very machoistic men. And when they had a gender identity crisis, they went through this whole transformation. And they didn't get any like hormone injections and everything, nothing of that. It was just more of, this is who I am and this is what I want to be exposed to. And this is what I'm going to do because I believe that I'm this kind of person. And you see that eventually they've learned a lot of things that the chemical part of triggers, like you mentioned, no longer plays an effect on them. Like, doesn't even appear.
Are you sure though?
To a certain extent, like based on the friends that I have, yes.
Because gender identity is, again, a whole different topic. Because
Yes.
I'll take this example where, think of the Roman Greco times, right? And I'm thinking of very specific, I wouldn't say civilization because they're part of the Greek civilization, the Spartans, right? The Spartans. And even the Greeks.
Yeah.
This whole gender identity thing was very loose, was very, very loose. And mostly people say gender identity is, okay, your sexuality, right? But especially for the Spartans, it is extremely loose where men develop this bond. It's beyond just sexuality. They develop this bond with each other, especially when they go into their training camps and all that. And women also develop this bond and this position in society, which is not sort of gender defined. It is not gender defined. It's just role defined based on certain things that they do. But that didn't take away how they reacted to things. That didn't take away how they emoted to things. It is shown that they still emoted the same way. Like men still had certain issues and certain ways of not being able to express themselves. And women could, but they kind of worked into it. So I think this whole gender question may be something else altogether.
Yeah, something else altogether, I think.
But there is a point there. I mean, maybe, do you see a difference, like among your friends?
I do.
Yeah.
I think it's also, for me, I'm going to bring in another variable, which is generation.
Generation. Okay.
Yes. So if I were to bring myself 20 years back to my parents' era, there is no possibility for them to have gender fluidity. At least not
Okay.
in the open.
Right.
And that's how it is shaped, right? Based on the chemicals that they have and all that, they don't have a chance. And that's why you don't really see them expressing certain things.
Your parents, how old are they?
My parents are around 60.
60. 60 would have been, their early adulthood would have been the 60s era, right? 60s, 70s.
Yes, I think so. 70s, about that.
70s.
It's very curious. Like, I'm saying this is because we hear this a lot with like our parents' generation, that kind of thing. Maybe Sashe was gonna pull this generational thing a bit further back because we're not gonna say his age.
Oh, thanks.
But we keep on saying that our parents' generation, they didn't have gender fluidity. But this whole modern movement of gender fluidity started during that 60s era.
Yep.
Right, with psychedelics coming in the LGBTQ community as well. But why? Why do we, if that's where the progenesis is, why didn't they express it, or why didn't they feel it the same way that we're feeling it?
Because it takes time.
I also think we're off track.
Right.
Because I think that is a question of freedoms.
Right.
It's a question of societal pressure.
Right.
Being able to overcome that. There's
Right.
a lot of laws.
Right.
There's a lot of hard work that had to go to overcome things, right?
Mm.
Just like women being able to vote, or any other other rights that have been evolved over time. So I think it's different.
But
I
then
don't-
it still comes down to this point. Norms.
Norms, yeah.
If it's not normalized then,
Exactly.
it's not going to work.
And
But
that-
because now it's open,
Yeah.
you can see that there's a change.
And that's actually what I think the point was with the men and emotions, right? It's a question of what was norms and what is norms today.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, so let me pose this question. Do you think men are more comfortable expressing emotions today than 10, 20 years ago?
Depends on what emotions you're talking about.
Yeah, I'd say that as well. Depends
Okay.
on what emotions. But if you
Is
want
there some emotions that they are more comfortable expressing?
definitely,
Yes.
yeah,
Is there emotions that they're less comfortable expressing?
definitely.
Such as?
But and even then, it's the same set of emotions. Like take it 60s, 70s, even all the way back into the past, the BC eras and all that. That common emotion that men are very comfortable expressing is stoicness, like facing fear of that fight and flight kind of thing. Unfortunately, anger.
Yep.
An anger-based reaction, whether it's a challenge-based emotion.
Yep.
Or to some level, I wouldn't call it an emotion, but I call it a combination of emotion. The need to be confident because of what a role that a man has to play, right? Those still are the most natural ones that we observe even now. That emotion of just empathetically caring. Like example, that early example that we just spoke about, two things. One is that kid that you brought up, like how you thought about hugging the kid versus when I was thinking about it, I was thinking of standing in front of the kid to protect him away from that.
Okay, context, I did that first. Then when everything was chill.
Okay, sure. But even after that, I wouldn't have thought of following through with that. I would have just, okay, are you alright? Are you good? Stoic, confident, versus thinking about how that kid is feeling
Yeah.
and trying to comfort that kid. So yes, I'm able to express more. I'm not afraid to express it, but maybe still the natural emotions or natural way of expressing is still the same.
I'm going to go back. I'm going to disagree with you on this as well.
All right.
I think in that example,
Yeah.
it was actually about teaching the kid to emote.
Right.
It wasn't about your emotion.
Right.
So what you're talking about is a logical self. Because you saw a threat, you took action on the threat. It has nothing to do with emotions because you didn't actually have an emotion.
Right.
Right? So it wasn't a problem with you emoting. And she just being a little bit more
Yeah.
nurturing with kids.
Okay.
That's more of a personality thing.
Right.
That's about both of you.
Right.
But I think when we talked about the example, it was about how to get kids to be comfortable having fear.
Right.
Right. And so it's about when you deal with that person, so that person can grow up later
Right.
to express emotions.
Okay. Then let me take that first example that I
Yeah.
kind of tested you both on. When I asked that question, like
Yeah.
how this year has been
Yeah.
for the both of y'all, right? Both of y'all reacted differently.
Hmm.
Right? One, you spoke about yourself,
Yeah, personal.
how you felt
Yeah.
about things. Sashe, you logic
Yeah.
you logic that whole thing. You spoke
Yeah.
about two categories of
Yeah.
things of that we have to consider.
Yeah.
You never said how you felt.
Yeah. So I'm not saying that I'm evolved. So
So I mean,
no,
going
but
back
no,
to
no.
that question.
Yeah,
right?
back to the same point, right? So for me, I'll give you the same example. So I grew up being told not to emote,
Okay.
right? I am a case study, right, of that.
Right.
So, words like, and not even parents. Parents is one thing. Grandparents, cousins. That's a whole different can of worms, right? Of like role identity as a man and things like that. But even friends, right? Be a man. That phrase,
expression, yeah.
Man
right?
up.
Yeah.
When you're about to cry,
Right.
be a man.
Right.
Okay, don't be a beep, right? Right.
So you cannot say the word to make this family friendly as much as possible.
So, what do those teach you, right? As you're growing up, even from peers, right? You want to
Yeah.
stand up and you want to portray a certain image. So as a man, you're taught you're gonna either fight or flight. I'm not gonna emote. I'm just gonna take action, right? But over time, I want to say I've evolved a bit, right? But I haven't evolved to the point that I'm going to express emotions out in public,
Right.
right?
Right.
So the only time I'm comfortable with my emotions, I know what my emotions are. I know how to identify them. I know how to handle them. The only person I would be comfortable is with my wife
Right.
to openly express my emotions.
Right.
Right. Otherwise, I'm very reserved.
Even then, let me ask that question because in this room, let me check. Okay, only the two of us are married, right? Unless both of y'all will have something
Yeah.
hidden away,
Secret
stashed away
marriages.
somewhere.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
No?
No.
Okay, so I asked this question because I feel it as well. Like being married, especially interactions with my wife.
Yeah.
There are times I stop myself from emoting
Yeah.
because I'm thinking to myself, like, I'm the husband. Sure, my wife may be having a very tough day, or she may be, because of that, being very unreasonable.
Yeah.
I'm not saying she's unreasonable, but she could. But if I were to express myself, it's not going to solve the problem. And I know that I can hold it in.
Yeah.
That thought, I know that I can hold it in. Even though I'm feeling so upset about what has transpired, I hold it in. And then it becomes a habit that I keep on doing.
Okay. So I think the problem
Do
is
you
when
have
it
this
becomes a habit.
Right.
So back to, we agree everybody has emotions.
Right.
You're able to identify the emotion.
Right.
But it's your choice whether you want to emote now, later, in what way you want to emote. So that I think is very powerful. I think that's a good thing. I think that's good for everyone, whether male, female,
Right.
doesn't matter, right?
Right.
You should be able to choose how you want to emote.
Right.
At some points, I want to be angry because I want to show anger,
Right.
right?
Right.
But I also should know what's a healthy way to show anger.
Right.
And not punch a wall or something like
Right.
that. There are healthy ways to do
Right.
it. So I think that's the part that we need to get to as people,
Okay.
Yeah.
not men or women.
Okay.
But I think if you're at the point where you can identify and choose, I'm not going to express it now, that's great.
Right.
To me, that's a good thing.
Right.
That doesn't mean men don't emote.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So even for women, I think a lot of women also do that. They choose, right? Sometimes they're pissed off at their husbands, for not taking out the trash, but they're like, okay, I'm gonna hold it in until later,
But it's a very interesting thing, bro. So I grew up with a lot of boys. So I grew up with the idea that I am masculine. So I consider myself very fluid in that sense. And when these things happen, like it's okay for men to not express and control it. But if I were to withhold, like say, I don't want to talk about it now, let me cool off. I'll come back.
reverse problem.
And then they'll be like, no, you must tell me what's happening. And I'm like, what? Is it because I'm a female? Because
Right.
I'm a woman that I
Right.
usually,
That's interesting, yeah.
Right.
So I'm like, wait a minute, hold up. This is not right. We should have the choice.
Yeah.
It's same. But because people have been used to it, they expect us to react.
Yeah.
And they're like, if men don't react, it's fine. They can
I
figure
think
it
it's a
out.
little bit of that whole, you expect that of women, and also that I call this new age thinking a little bit, where, ew, you have a problem, we've got to talk about it right now.
yeah.
Versus, there's the time and place,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to deal with it here now. You do have to deal with it, but maybe some people need a bit more time before they talk about things. And that might also be sort of adding on to this whole pressure of why are not men doing that? But maybe that's just a different way of processing. Maybe they want to take some time. And even women can do that same thing. Women could say like, look, I may be too emotional at this point in time. Let me cool off first and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
It could potentially be that.
Yeah. I think the that advice I think applies to men and women.
Yeah.
I think both men and women need to
Learn how to
learn
deal
how
with it.
to control
Chill.
emotions, right?
Yeah.
That applies across the
Right.
board. But I think where men are weaker is that they can't even identify the emotion they're having.
Right.
They just go from emotion to reaction, right? They don't even know, like,
But
boom.
that's the fight and flight thing,
yeah,
right?
because they've been taught to take action, right? I've been
Yeah.
taught, like, do something.
Yeah.
Be a man.
We're taking some time and just understanding it before doing something about it. Probably we'll talk about one more point before we sort of got to wrap this up as well. Something you talked about generations, which is interesting because I was just thinking about the study I was reading, and off the mic, the study I was reading just before I got on, where there is a real clear difference between what they call Western society or the Western side of the hemisphere versus the Eastern side of the hemisphere. How societal expectations are a little different. And we just said it just now, where Asian culture, it is, okay, if you're a boy, you're a boy, you're a girl, you're a girl, you've got this set of things that you got to do. And I wouldn't say that wasn't there in the Western society. It just evolved a little differently, right? It evolved a little differently and it started changing. Where now we see both men and women not, I would say, expressing more. It's just they're expressing and understanding that they express differently. Just coming to that understanding and accepting that. And it is permeating towards us as well. But what I want to ask is, like, how we've got sort of 3 age groups in here.
Do we?
In a way.
Nigesh thinks he's much younger than me, so.
Okay. We'll just let him have today.
You guys got the camera on, you can see, right? You be the judge. You be the judge.
Okay.
But, okay, so we say that it takes time for generations, right? Generations to actually accept any sort of change that is coming through. Like, maybe Sashe, from your point of view, like, when you were growing up, what was the point of view? Was it, there's this whole separate men, women kind of thing. Was there, did you feel any change? Or is it something that's really recent right now?
Yeah, so I think it's really recent right now.
Right.
I mean, I'll give you all male role models in my family were cut from the same cloth.
Okay.
Right, which is macho, very stereotypical male roles, behaviors, and things like that. And I'm just going to use them as a case study, right?
Okay.
And because, for me, it's not fair to compare me to them. I think everybody has their own experiences and
Right.
exposures.
Right.
I grew up differently. I grew up in
Right.
a different time.
Right.
I grew up where I didn't have to, worry about putting food on the table. They did, right? So there was very different times, right? So let's just use them. Now, I have seen them over time mellow down
Right.
in the way they are and the way they act. I have seen a particular member of my family who has been the, just absolute typical zero emotions,
Right.
all facts, figures, all about, plans and actions and helping the family survive,
Right.
It's about putting food on the table, safety,
Right.
all of that.
Right.
But over time, some bad things happens. And when the emotions, at that point when emotions happen, they can still control it with their logic and with their, roles. But over time, when something bad happens, the emotion breaks them
Right.
because there is nothing they can do to control it. They've always felt that they had control over things that they do. And so whenever they had emotions, they had something to do
Right.
to overcome it.
Right.
But that's not always the case, right?
Right.
Life happens.
Right.
And
Right.
then you feel the emotion and you don't know what to do with it and it explodes. And that's really bad.
Mm.
And I've seen that. But at the same time, I've also seen them grow up. And I think the exposure, times are changing, culture is changing, society is changing, gender roles are changing. They see that. They have their grandson, granddaughter. They see things are changing. So they're also mellowing. So I think there is a difference. But I think over time, as society, we're evolving. We're allowing people to emote. just in the workplace, think about it, right?
Right.
Like Leaderonomics, right? Where I hope everybody finds this a safe zone. People feel comfortable emoting, right? So workplaces are changing, family situations are changing.
Right.
So I think we're headed in the right direction.
Okay.
So I think the conclusion to me is that men do emote.
Right.
They just sometimes don't know that they're emoting. I think if people could just stop and just identify it would be better.
Okay. Andrea, what about you?
What was the question again?
Well, the whole generational thing, right? So when you were growing up until now, was it for you a norm that there is this understanding that you can emote, right? Whether you're men, women, or was there still that very distinct cultural delineation?
So I think my case is a bit complicated.
Right.
So I think because I grew up backstory, ding ding ding. So my parents wanted a boy,
Yeah.
and here I am, not a boy.
Okay.
But because of that, they told me that they wanted a boy. It just went into my head as a kid as, okay, I'll try to be a bit more boyish for them.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, I don't know what happened when I was 5, but yeah, it just came into my
Okay.
head. And eventually, when I hit primary school, I started becoming more boyish.
Mm.
I started adapting a lot of values that were taught to my so-called brothers from a different mother, like
Okay.
my friends.
Right.
Things like, being brave, play sports, take charge, be a leader, speak your mind,
Right.
and all these things.
Right.
And there is a certain expectation still, because they expect me to be emotional. They expect me to do what females do, nurture, take care of them,
Right.
be nice to them,
Right.
those kind of things.
Right.
But when I show the opposite, they react, because they're like, that's not normal.
Mm.
And this is what we don't accept because you are a female.
Right.
So I think that in generation, even then, when I was in high school, it's the same. Teachers would tell me that's not how girls act.
Right. Right.
You should let the boy take charge.
Right.
And I'm like,
Wow.
hold up, please.
Mm.
What?
Okay.
And it was very aware. I was very aware about it, and that's when I started, understanding that there are certain expectations that have been set on me, even if the generation is peers, my peers, same generation. And they are either brought up by single mothers, they don't have a role model in the male sort of thing, but yet they still have a certain expectation of me just because I'm female.
Right.
So as much as I agree that generations change, I think it's depending on that circle of people that influence that specific person
Right.
at that time.
Right.
Because if I had my parents who tell me that I cannot do this because I'm a girl, I wouldn't be like this now. I would be
Right.
more subdued in a way. I won't really speak my mind, and I will react a bit more when it comes to times of crisis.
Yeah.
But because I told myself, no, I do not want to be this, I want to learn certain things that I see as masculine, and I
Right.
resonate with that.
Right.
Not because, I need to, when I was younger, I'll be like, oh no, I need to top that boy, I'm going to be the best person ever. And that at that change in high school, because I realized that, actually, no, I like that about me, simply because that's me.
Right.
You're comfortable.
Yeah, and up till now, I still have guy friends who are my age and around that similar age.
Right.
They still have a certain expectation of me.
Okay.
And just to top up, like you said, maybe it's not generational, right? I just think about cartoons, right? Cartoon stereotypes, right? Like I grew up watching, I don't know, Popeye,
Yeah, I did too.
right?
Yeah.
So
Did too.
Olive Oil always had the emotions,
Yeah.
right? And Popeye had to jump in and save the day,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or even go back, not from cartoons, like popular TV shows like A-Team or whatever. The guy had to take action versus
Yeah.
the girl was in trouble,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and had
Damsel
all these
in distress.
damsel in
kind of thing.
distress,
Yeah.
strong emotion. All this is deep cultural programming that we
Right.
just have to break.
Right. I think it's happening because if you and maybe we're trying to find that equilibrium because if anything, if you look at the generation that's coming after us, right? I think there was a little bit of pushing too far to one corner, and we keep on talking about this whole equality thing
Yeah.
where men and women should be equal. And I know that's a whole different topic, but even when it comes to these kind of things, expressing your emotions, expressing who you are, expressing thoughts that you have, that was first this thought of equality. But I think the concept is wrong. It shouldn't be equality. It should be equity because we have to accept that we will express it differently. We will work very differently. And that's what I'm gathering from what we're talking about as well. It's not a case of even I guess it makes the topic a bit moot, where it's not, why don't men talk about real struggles? It's actually men just express it differently, women just express it differently, right? And it's accepting that these are two ways that they do it, and how can we find ways to just live with that,
Yeah.
right? And you see even in media, right, where maybe the early 2000s was a heavy push towards, okay, we need more women heroes, we need more women spokespeople, more women leaders, that kind of thing. But I don't know about you guys, but I'm starting to see that shift where, okay, it's not about the gender anymore.
Yep.
It's about people just being people.
Yeah.
Like men are going to be men, women are going to be women. We are biologically also made differently. So there are advantages. Why should we not take those advantages, right?
Yeah.
But why should we not also leverage those advantages?
But that being said, I don't agree fully to that.
Okay.
I know we
Still
have-
has to disagree before we end.
Yeah,
Okay,
me
sure.
too.
Let's go.
Because I think, like, for my own principle is this: it doesn't matter if you're a man, woman. You have serotonin, dopamine, XYZ, whatever,
Yeah.
differently.
Testosterone or whatever.
Testosterone, estrogen, yeah.
Yes, all of that,
Yep.
right? For me, it's as simple as if you're in a generation that has vast knowledge and you are exposed, like way more than the generations before, you then have a responsibility to make a choice. And it's not about ignorance is something that is still very big today. Like people still think that, oh, man is A, women is B.
Yeah.
But it's the fact that saying that, okay, actually, they might act differently, but as me, what do I want to do?
Yeah.
Right.
If let's say I'm male, right?
Right.
And I realize, oh no, I've been brought up like this, and there's another whole new world out there that women experience. And if I identify with certain things that women do, like express differently, and I choose, okay, I think that is a good way for me to express myself.
Right.
I should choose it and
Okay.
then own it, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I want to add a word there. So I mean, you talk about equality, equity, right?
Yeah.
So the word that keeps coming to my mind is individuality.
Individual.
We should respect individuality, which is what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of what
Identity.
your
Right.
hormonal balance is.
Right.
It's your individuality. And the thing is, we need to allow individuals to express themselves
Right.
as themselves.
Right.
I think the problem has become over time is that because of the gender-based roles,
Yeah.
we're not allowing some people to express and some other
Right.
people to express. But if we
Right.
just break all those and just say,
Right.
even as individuals,
Right.
just express yourself as an individual.
Right.
And then the key thing is, to me, just first of all, know that you have an emotion and then express it healthily.
Right.
And as an individual, we've all had different experiences, exposures. As men, you have different experiences. Exposures, as an Indian, you have different experiences. As an Asian, you have a different experience. And that all has programmed us to, say what is okay and what's not okay. But I think what the message here is that we all agree that emotions are good and that we should know that we can emote,
Right.
and we should just learn how to do it healthily.
So I have a follow-up question to that. Nigesh is shaking
Wow.
his head.
Let's go. I mean, I'm good with this.
So the question is, there are a lot of people out there who say that it is not healthy for men to not talk about their struggles. What do you think about that?
Sorry, say that again. It's not healthy for men.
To not talk about their struggles.
Right. Okay, my point of view is back to that whole choice thing again, right? And that whole equality, equity thing again. If that's what that person's choice is, I guess we gotta trust that person, right? If that's what they feel is the best thing for themselves, we just gotta let them do it. Because I don't know, the feeling is, if someone has chosen that I don't want to express it right now, I don't. I just don't feel comfortable doing it. Like, I can imagine my own father, right? My own father, if I go and tell him that, look, Pop, just let it out. If you want to cry, cry. He's not going to do it. He's not.
Yeah.
And I think if that's the case, sure, let them be what they want to be. But if they feel that there's some value in what's being said and they want to try, great. If they see full value in it and they want to go ahead and do it, great. I think that's going back to that point that you just mentioned.
Individuality.
Individuality. If you want to make that choice, make that choice. If you don't want to, don't.
I know where that advice comes from. And that advice comes from the fact that we've had this problem with men not emoting. And I think that advice is good with that context because like for men who don't understand their emotions and they don't express it, it's going to blow up.
Yeah.
So that's where that advice comes from. You should really talk about it before you blow up. Like I said, I've had that example of people not talking, and then just blows up, right? So that's good advice. But I also agree with Nigesh, and I agree with you. That was a first for this podcast.
Yeah.
When you look so shocked, I agree with you. Wait, what?
But I also agree with Nigesh because I think if we get past those problems, then yes, different people have different ways of handling it. So you shouldn't force everyone to talk. Like for me, I wouldn't want to talk, but I'm not also unhealthy in my relationship with my emotions. But for people who have unhealthy relationships with their emotions, I can understand that advice is good advice.
Yeah.
So I have another follow-up question. So the first two levels of identifying emotions,
Right.
and what's the other one? Before that, having emotions, right?
Yeah.
That's clear. The second one is the most important. Identifying those emotions. Do you think that we as humans, not men or women, can identify emotions without talking about it?
Yes.
I kind of do agree with it as well, because I think if anything, even prehistorically, right, language came later. Language came a lot later. So what was the first way that we communicated with each other? It is through our expressions, whether it is very blatant, visible expression or even micro expressions. Those things that we pick up and we don't really know what are those things, right? So I would say, yeah, kind of.
Okay, so that is expression based, right?
Right.
What we see.
Yeah.
But
But as the person, would you know what you're feeling if you don't? Will you be able to identify it if you don't sort of cross check with somebody else?
The reason why I said yes is because you asked, can we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I say yes, can.
Yeah.
But is it easy? No. Because I think as you get older,
Says the guy who's bad.
no, but I think if you have enough, early on, I think you really need to talk to people. You need to explore your emotions. You need to identify your emotions, because sometimes you don't know and you'll be wrong, right? But as you get more comfortable with your own emotions and you understand it and you see the triggers and you know what it feels like and you know what you do, I think more and more it becomes self-awareness kicks in, and you don't really need to talk about
Right.
it. You actually know already.
Right.
So you can, but you need practice, and then it's not easy. Right?
Yeah. The reason I kind of said kinda is because I made that point early on where we're not good at identifying our emotions. We're not. We know the feeling. We have a feeling and we express that feeling. But to say what that feeling is,
Yeah.
I think that's where, as human beings,
Yeah.
whether men or women, we are just not built to
Yeah.
say what exactly it is.
I mean, it's good. We have some mystery in our lives. It's fine.
Yeah.
And a lot of failures to learn.
Yeah. I guess that's what makes life exciting.
Yeah.
Right? And on that note, yeah, Sashi's been walking around actually showing us time.
Yeah.
I didn't see any of it. Oops.
But yeah, I mean,
He's about to put the rancangan tergendala.
yes.
Beep,
We're
beep,
done, guys.
beep.
We're done. So I think that's the format here. So for those y'all listening, we didn't come to a conclusion here. We didn't, and that's the whole point. We gave you different points of views, and it's up to you. It's up to you to decide. Like, what do you think about this whole topic? Like, I think generally we all had a point of a sort of coming together, saying that each individual, just let an individual be an individual, but there are certain finer points that are different, and I think each one of us owe it to ourselves to ask those questions, and that's the whole point of Talk to Me here. So hope you guys, your mind is opened up based on things that we have spoken about. Hope that allows you to explore this particular topic, and maybe it allows you to reframe it. Instead of thinking about why do men really struggle to talk about their problems or their emotions, maybe that's the reframing that is required. Maybe we shouldn't be thinking about men or women anymore. We should be just thinking about how do men and women express themselves. And with that, we're going to call it. I want to say thank you, Sashi.
Thanks.
For joining me in
Thank
this
you.
conversation. Andrea, thank you for joining in this conversation. We'll do it again soon, because you will see them at some point, because as we talk about different topics, it may relate, or we may want to hear that disagreement. Like I
For
said.
sure.
And the whole point is, I guess let's agree to disagree.
Yep.
All right. So thanks everybody. Thanks for listening in. And I got to do the plug because it's important. A lot of the research I did while talking about this particular topic, and this is not a shameless plug, this is a real plug because I really did do the research on Necole itself. It's an app that we have, and this program, thankfully, is brought to you by Necole. So if you want to find out more, just head on over to Necole.app, and if it's your cup of tea, subscribe. We'll be back again next week with another topic, and that time I can say that it's going to be 2 bald men in the studio. Wait for that. Thanks everybody for joining us. This has been Talk to Me. Nigesh Armon signing out with Sashe and Andrea.